Hi, everybody. I'm going to get started. Welcome to my talk. I'm going to be talking about designing DevDAOs, this interesting little meme that I'll be talking about today with Radicle, and kind of talking a little bit about the future of open source. So my name is Abbey. That's my Twitter handle, Abbey_Titcomb. I'm the head of the community and governance team at Radicle, which is a peer-to-peer stack for code collaboration. I'm also on the council of the foundation, the Radicle Foundation, and also of the Optimism Foundation. So I'm doing a lot of governance these days. And right now I spend most of my time on Radicle. So before I tell you about what we're doing at Radicle, I kind of just wanted to give you a little overview of what we're talking about today. So I'm going to be talking about this term that I've been trying to meme to life called Devdao. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can build DevDAOs with Radicle, so with the Radicle stack. And then I'm actually going to focus a lot on the work that I've been doing at Radicle over the last couple of months, which is designing Radicle itself as a DevDAO, which is why this is in the governance track. So this isn't a great talk because I've been working a lot, but this is kind of the first time that we're like talking about this publicly, so hopefully it's slightly interesting to everybody. So before getting into what I mean by designing Radicle as a DevDAO, we can kind of talk about what a DevDAO is. So a DAO, to do that, we should probably talk about what a DAO is. So DAOs are obviously decentralized organizations, but they are often based on code, and they have these like unique programmable capabilities that allow them to dissolve and merge to any degree of like composability that you can envision. And so often they use these things that we call tokens and have these qualities of distributed or decentralized ownership, trustless governance, often on-chain, often in permissionless environments, and programmable incentives, basically giving us a way to disrupt all traditional notions of ownership and use them to design our own incentive models. And that kind of brews this like little potion, this little DAO potion. But so if we think of what, so basically, like, that's a very esoteric way, I think, of describing what a DAO is, but when you think of what a DAO is in practice, it's actually just like internet communities with assets that they can use to fund different things. And so with this definition, we can actually define DevDAOs a little bit more specifically as a community that uses distributed ownership, trustless governance, and programmable incentives to coordinate the maintenance and development of open source software. So that's the definition that I'm using today to describe DevDAOs. And basically, again, in practice, it kind of just looks like a group of developers that coordinate around a set of GitHub repos, probably with a Discord server, and a Gnosis safe. And that's kind of like the baseline, I guess, like brew your own DevDAO. And basically, this allows development teams to design new ways to like maintain and develop open source software, often with funding built in, which basically is kind of re-envisioning the whole open source sustainability issue. So it combines what the project needs with what the individual wants to focus on more permissionless contribution. I have a note here that says the best dev teams and DAOs will work like open source, which is really funny. I don't remember writing that. So with Radicle, which is the project that I work for, Radicle is basically a decentralized stack for collaboration. So Radicle itself is a stack for building DevDAOs. And so what we do with that is, well, yeah, I should go through this. So Radicle is basically like a stack for decentralized collaboration. It's many things. It's secure and uncensorable code infrastructure. So things like peer-to-peer code hosting, decentralized collaboration tools that allow you to use do everything that you do on GitHub, just in an experience that's built on protocols, not platforms. It also allows collective code governance because we employ like sovereign developer identities. Instead of GitHub accounts, you have cryptographic keys that you can attest to your Ethereum identities, which give you the ability to kind of like run around Web3 with this developer identity, similar to how you wield your GitHub handle or profile. And it also has new ways to earn money for open source. And so funding FOSS and using crypto native funding tools for FOSS is like also in the Radicle mandate, and we have like a lot of tools that we've been building to support that. So it's basically like a decentralized stack for collaboration. It's built for DevDAOs. It was started because we have this belief that our dependence on centrally hosted platforms and corporations for the distribution of like critical open source infrastructure is inherently unsustainable, regardless of Web3, just in general. This is our belief. And so we believe that free and open source software, and Web3 especially, needs resilient collaboration infrastructure to be built on if we truly want it to challenge the traditional institutions that govern our day-to-day life. And so I'll wrap it up on what Radicle is, but this is where you can start using Radicle. So Radicle.network is our web client. This allows you to kind of, this is like your GitHub parody experience. It allows you to share, host, publish your Git repos on a peer-to-peer network, access them, Git clone. We have PRs dropping here soon. We're going to have issues. And so this is kind of like the way to interact with Radicle from the browser. And then we have Drips.network, which is our crypto-native funding tool that we built for FOSS and for creators in general, which allows, it's basically like a streaming protocol that allows you to accept funds, redirect them into different places. And so this is also like a really cool tool to use. So I blew right through that because, again, I want to focus on how we're designing ourselves as a DevDAO instead of what Radicle is. But if you're interested in using Radicle for your DAO or your project, just find me after, and I can kind of like walk you through all of the amazing things you can do with it. So, yeah, so today what I wanted to talk about was how we're designing Radicle as its own DevDAO. And so this kind of spurs from this other belief that we have. So in addition to believing that our dependence on centrally hosted platforms and corporations is inherently unsustainable, we also believe that the future of open source is self-sustaining, community-owned, and governed decentralized organizations. And the reason is because open source communities are like the OG DAOs. They've been experimenting with governance and decentralization way before the DAO even got hacked. And because at their core, they're the most OG form of commons-based peer production. The term was actually coined to describe the phenomenon that was open source software. And so as this quote describes, like open source software is not just a technical form of development. It's not only a development style. It's an inherent network of interacting socio-technical processes where they're all intertwined, they're dependent, they're co-evolving, and they're inseparable in performance. Because open source communities are incredibly social as they are technical. And so this like multi-dimensional aspect is why they're treated as a phenomenon, and there's cultural significance to the development of free software, not just technical. So for more on this theory, I would also have these cute little QR codes that maybe you can scan if you can zoom in far enough. But I did this talk at ETH Denver, which was like way more theory-driven about this, and so you can kind of go check it out. But it's basically like how to design regenerative open systems. And so like I spoke about how we could have this unique opportunity to use DAOs and different crypto primitives to design regenerative open source ecosystems because we have this ability to distribute ownership and communally enact change within a DAO via governance, which means that we have like new opportunities for creating positive sum games. Oh, I wasn't showing this. This is a really esoteric flowchart that I walk through in the presentation. I'd watch it. It makes sense. But basically, the theory is that we have like more potential to design positive sum games, which then also allow us to create new behaviors within ecosystems that, because individuals have the ability to influence and enact change and reap benefit from the organization. So that's like what that post is about. And I would go do that because that kind of contextualizes a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. But so basically, Radicle from its inception was always envisioned as this new kind of open source project, one that's built, governed, and financed via the internet. And so throughout the last year, throughout the last 2 years actually, we've been deploying the technical, economic, and social foundations that are like necessary to achieve this vision. And so I have this discourse post. This presentation is actually just my discourse posts in slide form. And so this has always been the vision of Radicle, and it speaks to kind of, again, our theory behind like what we think the future of open source is. And so we've started on the path of designing Radicle to be a truly open source, community-led, and self-sustaining network for software collaboration, a DevDAO in every way. And so that's kind of like the thesis that has been driving this huge chunk of work, which we've been calling our transition to the DAO. So up until 2021, core development for the project had been coordinated via Monatic, which was a venture-funded Berlin-based GmbH. That mandate was to make decentralized code collaboration a reality by contributing to the development of these open source primitives like Radicle and the original OS coin, which was like one of the first names for our funding tools. But so in February 2021, which is like, time is not real anymore, so that was like a year and a half ago, right? We launched RAD, which is our native governance token. And with that, not only did we decentralize the network by basically, creating a DAO, instantiating a on-chain treasury that's governed by token holders. But we actually dissolved Monatic. We dissolved the entire company, and we transitioned all of our contributors and our core teams to the Radicle Foundation, which is a Swiss nonprofit entity created to support the decentralization of the Radicle network and the development of free and open source tooling. So that was like this huge, huge step that was super important towards like the technical and economic decentralization of Radicle. The control of the project's smart contracts were decentralized among the Radicle community. The Radicle treasury was established, and holding over 50% of RAD token supply, the treasury is publicly managed and can fund the project into perpetuity. And so in practice, we've always envisioned this treasury funding the maintenance and development and growth of the Radicle ecosystem far into the future. And so now we've been engaging in this like social transition and laying the social scaffolding we need to truly design Radicle as this self-sustaining community-led network for code collaboration. And so that's kind of what we've started doing today, which is transitioning from the Radicle Foundation to the Radicle DAO to fully realize our original vision. Just checking on time. Maybe I have enough time to talk about all this, but so basically, what does this transition mean in practice? It means that the Radicle DAO will facilitate and manage all core development work of the Radicle project. It will set and coordinate a project-wide strategy somehow. It will manage the budget for Radicle-wide development and operations and ecosystem funding, and it will onboard and offboard core teams, so manage the actual like funding and defunding of these projects. So what does success look like for this transition? Success is if we can continue to decentralize decision-making power throughout the DAO to enable all of these responsibilities. If we can fund and coordinate all Radicle core work via the DAO, via the treasury. Reduce the capacity of the foundation, so it's very limited and only for necessary real-world interactions. And that the treasury assets can sustain the growth of the project in the long term. And so what are our goals with this? Well, the goal is to, in this process, not only build and design a DAO that can do all these things and the processes around it, but to distribute influence and ownership in a way that truly represents a decentralized and fair organization, reduce our dependencies and our power pools, and actually design a DAO that is technically, politically, and socially resilient to secure the future of this open source public good that we're developing, which is our decentralized collaboration stack. And obviously long-term sustainability. So how do we actually build a self-sustaining DAO is a question. So my work has been trying to project manage this whole thing. And so we have these 4 work streams that we set that I'll blow through because I really don't have a lot of time. Org design, distribution of influence and ownership, and reevaluation of our DAO tooling. So the org design is obviously like developing the organizational structure to make this DAO a reality so it can do all the things that it says that it does. Our core teams become self-managed entities that are funded directly via the treasury. Distribution of influence, designing and implementing a strategy for distributing non-financialized governing power within the Radicle ecosystem, super important. Token voting isn't forever, and so we want to be introducing more equitable forms of influence distribution, which are in the network. Distribution of ownership, because token rewards are a great incentive mechanism, so devising and implementing an active strategy for distributing token rewards among network stakeholders. Then finally, doing an audit of our governance tooling stack. So all of this is in this discourse post, the next phase of the Radicle DAO, where we kind of like lay out all this, and everything's in process. We're also planning on dogfooding a ton of our Radicle tech, including this cute little nifty thing that's yet to be launched called Workstreams. And the goal is to basically create this like ever-flowing regenerative open source garden where everything is community-led, governed, and self-sustaining, and that's the Radicle vision, and I wanted to let you all know that we're working towards that today. So hopefully in a year, this will be a whole debrief on how that went. So this is our DevDao. You can check us out in Discord. Again, in February, we'll be talking about this again and seeing how it went. And until then, you can follow us on Twitter and join our Discord. Thank you. I don't think I have time for questions, right? Okay. I'll be around.